Well, let me tell you folks, the story of why the Munsters got yanked off the air is a real doozy. It's like one of those tales where you laugh, you cry, and you scratch your head wondering what the heck just happened.
Live stage.
Was it really Lurch in the library with the lead pipe? No, not quite. But do grab your popcorn and settle in. Welcome to Do You Remember? And let's dive into this spooky saga of TV's favorite horrifying with a heart of gold family. The Munsters, a monster hit? Well, sorta. First things first, let's talk about what exactly made the Munsters such a hit. Or at least, kinda a hit. Picture this, it's the 1960s, and TV viewers are kinda drowning in a sea of perfect suburban families with their white picket fences and shiny smiles. Now enter the Munsters, a family of monsters living in a gothic mansion right in the middle of that suburbia. The show was a breath of fresh air, or maybe more like a whiff from the crypt. People just loved them. And why? Well, because despite their fangs, their bolts, and that cool, sickly undead Frankensteinish complexion, the Munsters were just like everyone else.
That paper.
I knew it. Little goody two-shoes had to show up.
They really were the good old all-American family, if your idea of all-American included a 7-foot-tall green dad, a vampire grandpa, and the wolf child. But let's be real here. Even though the show had its charm, it wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. It was more like a cozy bonfire. Something the family would gather around on a chilly night.
Gee, Dad, could I go with you to see the fiendish monster next time?
It was never exactly the fireworks that TV executives dreamed it to be. The big bad competition. Now we have to talk about the elephant, or should I say the creepy kooky family in the room. Yes, the Addams family. You see, both the Munsters and the Addams family strutted onto the TV scene at roughly the same time, and boy did that spark a rivalry. Not even the level-headed Lily could handle it. It was kinda like Twilight before Twilight was a thing. You know, are you Team Munsters or Team Addams? And just like those sparkly vampires and werewolves, people picked sides. Some folks loved the quirky, macabre charm of the Addams clan, while some others were all about the more down-to-earth Munsters. But I do think here's the kicker. The Addams family was just a tad more sophisticated, a little more edgy too. They had Gomez showing us how to treat your spouse like royalty.
Buy a barrel of it.
That's the only way it comes.
But hey, the Munsters got pretty wild too. They were actually one of the first sitcoms to show a husband and a wife laying down in the same bed. I know, hot stuff.
Uh-huh.
Sure is a long way to the bathroom.
But hey, this was actually a big deal in the 1960s. Society was still reeling from Fred and Wilma Flintstone lounging in the same bed in animation. But bottom line, the Addams family was what you watched for a little something extra with your sitcom. They were like the cool goth kids in school, while the Munsters were more like the lovable misfits. I mean, Butch Patrick was even told to pretty much just be like Beaver Cleaver as a wolf kid. I mean, complete cozy wholesomeness was baked into this kind of freaky formula. When it came down to it, the Addams family just had that little extra something that made people tune in. Well, at least for a little while. That meant Munsters could get a little one note relying on slapstick, and that put the Munsters in a little bit of a tight spot. You can't have two spooky families hogging the spotlight, and in the end, one had to bite the dust. And spoiler alert, it was the Munsters. It's really a shame, because the Munsters made really smart, subtle choices every step of the way. Like Butch Patrick getting the role of Eddie. Of course he was a talented kid and deserves that credit, and he's also living my dream of dragging the Munster coach to nostalgic convention shows. But yes, that's neither here nor there. What I'm getting at is that Butch was also way shorter than the other Eddie hopefuls, and that played off really well next to Herman's towering tallness. You see what I mean? One little choice and it completely adds to the entire atmosphere. Oh, and they also made the smart choice of totally changing Eddie. In the original plan, Eddie behaved basically like an actual wolf. And that went completely against the spirit of the show, which was that these people are pretty much normal. They just look like haunted house residents. But even from the beginning, the Munsters crew knew they were in for a tough time because of the Addams family. The original mock-up for Mrs. Munster, Phoebe, was completely scrapped because she looked just like Morticia Addams. And yeah, that's fair. The resemblance is already strong enough that my younger brother used to get them mixed up a lot, even after that cast change. Now, Phoebe only appeared in the unaired pilot, but she could definitely be Morticia's long-lost twin. And both she and Morticia have their husbands wrapped around their finger. But the final death blow came when another show that was, in theory, maybe spooky, but in practice more campy came along. Yes, that would be Batman. Action-y, a bit ridiculous. Oh, they could be so strong if they worked together. But Batman had a trick in his utility belt. It ran a 2-episode weekly schedule. First the setup, and then the payoff. And, well, it turned out that each episode's delectable cliffhanger got resolved at the exact same time the Munsters aired. So, that setup, it just guaranteed viewers would flock to Batman, compared to the Munsters' episodic format. And once Batman teamed up with the Addams family, it was only a matter of time. Although, the Munsters and the Addams family both ended up having the same number of episodes. The Curse of Color TV. Ah, color TV. Remember when everything went from black and white to Technicolor, and suddenly you could see all the colors of the rainbow? And when someone in the neighborhood got a color TV, everyone had to come over to check it out. Well, not all were thrilled about it, especially not the Munsters. You see, part of the charm of the Munsters was that they were in black and white. It added to that old school classic horror vibe, like watching an old monster movie on a stormy night. And it makes even more sense when you consider Universal owned the rights to movie monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein. Sorry, Frankenstein's monster. So it made it easy for the Munsters to use those baddies, who all got popular in black and white movies. Black and white film is practically a monster's native habitat. But then, the 60s decided it was time for a Technicolor revolution. And suddenly, black and white shows were about as popular as a garlic necklace at a vampire convention.
Wow! I thought color TV. Gosh!
In their infinite wisdom, the bigwigs at the network decided, hey, the Munsters should make the jump to color too. But here's the thing. Turning a green-skinned, bolt-necked monster into a colorful, larger-than-life character isn't as easy as it sounds. What works for I Dream of Jeannie doesn't work for Count Dracula. Color actually gave Jeannie problems too, cause suddenly they had to really try hard with the smoke. The Munsters' main time slot competition, the Caped Crusader himself, thrived in color. Of course it did. Batman was made for that kind of display, so we could see our comic book heroes and baddies literally pop off the page. The Munsters? Like I said, we first met them in atmospheric black and white horror movies. So when they went full color, well, let's just say it didn't go over so well. The charm got lost somewhere in transition. But wait, our story gets more bizarre. Color costs cash. Once the Munsters started airing in color, it couldn't exactly go back to black and white, no matter how much we so wished it would. One problem though, CBS really was not keen on forking over the dough for a colorful program in general. And then throw in the fact that the Munsters seemed destined for another grave. Yeah, the network had no reason to put more eggs in this expensive, exhausting basket. Talk about painting themselves into a corner. The ratings, gremlins. Let's talk numbers for a second, shall we? Because when it comes down to it, TV shows are made by ratings. And the Munsters? Well, their ratings started to take a nosedive quicker than Herman Munster could smash through a door. At first, the Munsters were doing okay in the ratings department. Not spectacular, but decent. They were holding their own. But as the novelty wore off and the competition heated up, those numbers started to slip. And in TV land, slipping ratings are like a death sentence. It's like the Grim Reaper showing up at your door, scythe in hand. Here are some more fun numbers to consider. In its first year, the Munsters actually tied with Gilligan's Island at number 15. But while Gilligan and Co. set sail into 3 seasons with some 90-plus episodes, by year 2, the Munsters were ranked at a cool, catastrophic number 66, which is practically rock bottom. I'll always love the whole concept of the Munsters, by itself, and as a good metaphor to teach the kids. But I do see the tough spot the showrunners ended up in. You gotta keep those creative juices going the whole time if you want to keep momentum. Like the idea of a hearse being the family car was so perfect. But then you need more refreshing creative ideas after. Viewers were moving on to other things, shinier, newer, and frankly, more colorful things. Things that actually looked good in color and not worse. The only thing worse would be... Oh boy, that was close. Get that baby face off my screen. He was starting to look like Marilyn. Anyway, we know this song and dance. When the ratings go south, the network pulls the plug. And thus, the Munsters were to quote the Raven and a very iconic cuckoo clock. Nevermore. Nevermore! Too much of a good thing. You know how they say you can have too much of a good thing? Well, that might have been the case with the Munsters. They were everywhere. TV, merchandise, movies, you name it. But sometimes, when you spread yourself too thin, things start to fall apart. There was even a Munsters movie, Munster Go Home, which was supposed to be this big, grand adventure to keep the franchise alive and kicking. But here's the kicker, the movie was in color. And we already know how well that worked out for them. It was like trying to give Frankenstein's monster a makeover. It just didn't feel right. And now you have a different viewing experience on an entirely different medium. Just too many risks, and definitely not a worthwhile reward. Full disclosure though, I totally got a huge kick out of Herman and Grandpa driving along the Macy's Thanksgiving parade. All of autumn is the spooky season as far as I'm concerned, and that collab is a match made in, well, not heaven, but you know what I'm getting at.
It's the town car of the Munster family, and those TV favorites have come up with a gasser.
But still, besides garlic, the Munsters were susceptible to hype fatigue. And by the time the movie rolled around, it was clear that the magic was fading. Oh, speaking of fatigue, there's also the toll the Munsters took on the cast. Besides poor Fred and all that makeup, there was Yvonne bursting into tears when she saw herself totally in costume. It's that double-edged sword of TV fame, especially for a fancy movie star like Yvonne. Her co-stars thought she wouldn't fit in on set, and supposedly, yeah, she wasn't thrilled that her next big claim to fame involved a lot of green face paint. Oh, but don't worry. Yvonne proved Fred and Al wrong so well. Years later, they were the first to admit they were totally wrong about her. But their first season of all this exhausting work went on for 38 grueling episodes. Nowadays, TV shows barely get 8 episodes a season. So 38 was certainly rough, to say the least. That's 10 times the average. And all that extra work meant the cast was still exhausted when it was time to ramp up work for season 2. Basically starting themselves off with a huge disadvantage in energy and outright morale. On top of all that, those big events, one after another, really annoyed Al and Fred. Basically, they knew they had something pretty clever in the Munsters. A subtle and funny way to talk about being judgy to other people for no reason. But then, their schedules got filled to bursting with commercials, live appearances, even PSAs. The two leading men got the feeling that the network was putting more effort into publicity for the show, at the huge cost of the show's actual substance and wit. It became empty, and they just pushed for quantity over quality. All this hustle, and it wasn't enough to stop the audience from moving on. The ratings were in the gutter, and the charm that made the Munsters so special was getting lost in the shuffle. I mean, can we really do Halloween all year around? No, seriously, can we? The final nail in the coffin. So, what was the final nail in the coffin for the Munsters? Well, like any good monster tale, it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of bad luck, tough competition, and changing times. Having Batman as competition was an added burden they just couldn't handle. But oh, what irony that the same guy who designed the Munster coach also designed the Batmobile. So could the Munster Mobile transform this whole time? As if I needed reason to want that car more.
Open your eyes now, Herm.
But alas, the world was moving on, and the Munsters just couldn't keep up. The show that had once been a breath of fresh air in the TV landscape was starting to feel like a relic of a bygone era. And when the network decided to pull the plug, it wasn't exactly a shock. It was more like the inevitable ending to a story that had run its course. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, because even though the Munsters might have shuffled off the TV stage, they left behind a legacy that's still alive and kicking, or maybe groaning and clawing today. Fans still love them, reruns keep them in the spotlight, and every Halloween, you can bet there's a Herman or a Lily Munster costume making the rounds. Good luck with all that makeup though, it was really rough for Fred Gwynne. I tried my hand once for Halloween and, yeah, good luck. The legacy lives on. So let's review. Why did the Munsters get the boot? Whatever Herman might say, no, it wasn't Marilyn's fault for being so gosh darn normal. Simply the ratings dipped, the competition was fierce, and color TV just didn't do them any favors. But here's the thing, even though they got yanked off the air, the Munsters are far from forgotten. They've become a part of pop culture legend, a reminder that sometimes even the strangest, spookiest families can capture our hearts. Sure, they might have been taken off the air, but they're still around, lurking in the shadows, waiting to make us laugh and maybe even give us a little scare. And who knows, maybe one day we'll see a new generation of Munsters rising from the grave, ready to take on the modern world with that same goofy, ghoulish charm. In fact, here's a fun little riddle. How could the Munsters have such a devoted following after airing only 2 seasons? Well, it was canceled but not abandoned. The series popped up in syndication on a few smaller stations here and there, until, bam, the Munsters end up on Nick at Night. TV Land also scooped up our freaky family, but Nick at Night introduced the Munsters to a whole new generation of young viewers, kids who were basically getting a chance to experience the Munsters like we did. And it was still in that sweet spot, where Saturday morning cartoons were still good, the cereal was crunchy, the meals were happy. It was a time when nostalgia had a second chance right alongside Herman, Lily, and all the rest. And we know this revival, this reintroduction into the neighborhood was enough. Because, hey, just a few years ago, there was a Munsters Netflix movie. And listen, I totally get it. I get a little pit of dread in my gut anytime someone says the word reboot too. But I gotta say, the casting was pretty solid, and hey, like the saying goes, imitation is the highest form of flattery. Everyone still knows the Munsters were great. And like Herman taught us, what matters is the size of your heart and the strength of your character.
It doesn't matter. What does matter is the size of your heart and the strength of your character.
And that's exactly what the Munsters had. Until then, we'll just have to keep the memories alive and maybe watch a rerun or two. Okay, so I think you knew this question was coming, folks. Were you Team Munsters or Team Addams? What did you think of the scary little Munster movies we did get? And fair is fair, so I guess I'll answer. I like both. I know it's a total cop-out, but there's no denying that both frightening families brought different things to the table. But we're so lucky that we did get both shows. And I still really want to take that monster coach for a ride. But enough from me. Please share your thoughts of the Munsters and the Addams family in the comment section below. Because after all, we here at Do You Remember are nothing without you. So thanks for being here. If you enjoyed the video, please click that thumbs up icon. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a memory. But most importantly, from all of us here at Do You Remember, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a hauntingly happy day.